Ethan Hale had learned many rules during his training as a human diplomat, but none of them warned him about jokes. He had studied alien customs, translation limits, body language, and even the safest way to sit in rooms with unknown gravity shifts. Humor was mentioned only once, in a short sentence that said it was not reliably transferable between species. Ethan remembered that line as he stepped onto the landing platform of Velthira and smiled anyway. Velthira was beautiful in a quiet, careful way. The ground beneath Ethan's boots shimmered like polished crystal, reflecting the soft light of a pale blue sky. Tall structures rose in gentle curves instead of sharp edges, as if the city itself wanted to appear calm and welcoming. Everything about the place suggested balance and patience. The Larathi had built their world that way on purpose. Ethan adjusted the small translator device at his ear as a group of Larathi approached. They were tall and slender, their skin smooth and faintly glowing, with patterns that shifted slowly like moving stars. Their eyes were large and dark, and when they looked at him, Ethan felt as though they were not just seeing his face, but measuring his intent. "Welcome, Ethan Hale of Earth," the lead Larathi said. The translator rendered the voice into clear, neutral English. "You arrive as promised." Ethan nodded. "It's an honor to be here. I hope I didn't keep anyone waiting." "There is no waiting when purpose is shared," the Larathi replied. Ethan smiled again, unsure if that was poetic language or literal belief. He followed them toward the central hall, reminding himself to stay calm. This was humanity's first cultural exchange with the Larathi, a species known across nearby systems for their strict traditions and precise interpretation of meaning. The success of this visit could decide decades of cooperation. Inside the hall, the air felt warmer. Soft light flowed from the walls themselves, and symbols slowly formed and faded like breathing thoughts. Ethan was guided to a smooth platform and invited to speak freely so the Larathi could record his introduction for their archives. "This is the part where I talk about myself," Ethan said lightly. "No pressure." The Larathi stood in silence, waiting. Ethan cleared his throat. "I'm Ethan Hale. I'm a representative of Earth, but also just a regular human. I like exploration, learning new cultures, and, well, I guess I'm still figuring life out." The translator paused briefly, then continued. "I'm single," Ethan added with a small laugh, thinking of it as harmless filler. "No family ties, no partner. Free to travel, free to commit where I'm needed." The moment stretched longer than expected. The Larathi did not respond. Their skin patterns shifted faster, forming sharp, unfamiliar shapes. One of them tilted her head slightly, eyes fixed on Ethan with intense focus. Ethan felt a flicker of unease. "That was just small talk," he said, "a human habit." The lead Larathi raised a hand. "Your words have been received." That was all they said. The rest of the meeting passed smoothly, at least on the surface. Ethan spoke about Earth's hope for peaceful cooperation, shared knowledge, and mutual respect. The Larathi listened, recording every word. When the session ended, Ethan was escorted to his assigned living quarters, a quiet space overlooking a reflective pool that mirrored the sky above. As the door closed behind him, Ethan let out a long breath. "First contact nerves," he muttered to himself. "You did fine." Elsewhere in the city, deep within chambers older than human history, the same words were being replayed again and again. "I am single, no family ties, free to travel, free to commit." The Larathi archival system searched for meaning. Language matrices cross-referenced intent, context, and cultural parallels. What they found caused a ripple through their society. Among the Larathi, to declare oneself unbound was not casual information. It was a formal statement, used only during ancient rites. It meant the speaker was without prior obligation and was openly offering their future bonds to be shaped by a chosen covenant. It was not something said lightly. It was not something joked about. The Triune Sisters were summoned. They arrived together as they always did. Sayla moved with quiet authority, her pattern steady and calm. Myron's glow shifted quickly, reflecting curiosity and analysis. Thalkai's presence carried weight, her patterns deep and slow, like the movement of time itself. They stood before the projection of Ethan's recorded introduction. When the words replayed, all three felt the same certainty. "He has spoken a covenant phrase," Myron said, "and to do so publicly," Sayla added, "before witnesses and record." Thalkai inclined her head. "Intent is present, the offering is clear." "Could it be error?" Myron asked. "The translation has been verified," Sayla replied. "The phrasing aligns within acceptable variants. His declaration is complete." Silence followed, heavy and thoughtful. "It has been generations since an outsider spoke such words," Thalkai said at last, "and never a human." Preparation began immediately, though quietly. Ceremonial systems long dormant were activated, archives unlocked. Symbols of shared protection and trust were projected faintly across the city, subtle enough not to alarm visitors but clear to any Lorathi who knew their meaning. By the time Ethan woke the next morning, something had changed. He noticed it when he stepped outside his quarters. Lorathi who passed him inclined their heads slightly deeper than before. Some paused, placing a hand over their chest in a gesture he had not yet learned. The air itself seemed charged with expectation. Ethan frowned. "Okay," he whispered, "what did I miss?" He was escorted to breakfast, where the food had been carefully adapted to human needs. Even there, the attention felt different. Respectful, yes, but also personal, as if he mattered beyond his role. Midway through the meal, a message appeared on his tablet. It was a formal invitation, marked with symbols his translator labeled as high cultural significance. "You are requested to attend the Sanctum of Shared Oaths," the message read. Ethan nearly dropped the tablet. The sanctum was not on his schedule. In fact, it was specifically listed as a restricted site for non-Lorathi visitors. He contacted Earth Command immediately. The response was fast, tense, and full of questions Ethan could not answer. "I don't know why they invited me," he said. "I didn't agree to anything unusual." "Did you say anything unusual?" a voice asked. Ethan thought back. He hesitated. "I made a joke about being single." There was a pause on the line. "That may be a problem," the voice said carefully. As Ethan prepared to leave his quarters, he felt the weight of that sentence settle in his chest. He had come to Velthira to represent humanity's best qualities. He had not expected that a careless, human habit could carry such meaning among the stars. Outside, the city lights shifted, forming patterns that pointed toward the heart of Velthira. Somewhere ahead, the Triune Sisters waited, believing a promise had been made. Ethan took a steady breath and stepped forward, unaware that history had already begun to change, not because of a grand speech or advanced technology, but because a human had spoken freely, without knowing how seriously the universe might listen. Ethan walked through the city with two Lorathi guides beside him. They moved in silence, their steps smooth and perfectly matched, as if they shared one rhythm. The path beneath their feet glowed softly, responding to their presence. Ethan tried to focus on breathing evenly, but his thoughts kept racing. The Sanctum of Shared Oaths rose ahead of them, wider than any structure he had seen on Velthira. Its surface was clear like glass, yet deep within it, slow-moving lights drifted like memories given form. Ethan felt very small as he approached. "This place was not listed in my visit plan," Ethan said, keeping his voice calm. "May I ask why I was invited?" "One does not ask why an oath is answered," one of the guides replied. "One seeks to understand it." That did not help. Inside, the sanctum felt different from the rest of the city. The air was still, heavy with meaning. Symbols covered the walls, layered one over another, each glowing faintly before fading away. Ethan sensed that this room had witnessed decisions that shaped entire generations. At the center stood three figures, the Triune Sisters. Ethan recognized them immediately from briefing files, though seeing them in person carried far more weight. Sayla stood slightly forward, her posture calm and balanced. Myron's eyes followed Ethan closely, sharp and curious. Thalkai remained still, her presence steady and grounding, like a deep ocean that did not need to move to be powerful. Ethan stopped a respectful distance away. "I'm honored to be here," he said, "but I believe there may be some confusion." Sayla raised a hand gently. "Confusion exists only before truth is spoken. You have already spoken." Myron stepped closer. "Your words were clear. You declared yourself unbound and willing to commit." Ethan swallowed. "I didn't mean it that way. On Earth, saying you're single doesn't mean you're offering a promise. It's just information, sometimes even a joke." The sisters exchanged a look. Their skin patterns shifted, not in alarm but in thoughtful movement. "Explain this joke," Thalkai said. Ethan took a breath. "Humans use humor to ease tension. We say things lightly without deep intention. It helps us connect." "Connection without intention," Myron repeated slowly. "That is unusual." Sayla tilted her head. "Among the Larathi, words are chosen carefully. To declare yourself without bond is to invite one." Ethan nodded. "I understand that now, but I didn't know then. I don't want to insult your people." "Intent matters," Thalkai said, "but so does responsibility." The words settled heavily in the air. Meanwhile, far beyond Velthira, Earth Command gathered in urgent discussion. The transmission from Ethan had triggered alarms across diplomatic channels. Analysts studied Larathi customs with renewed intensity, cross-checking ancient records. "If the Larathi believe a covenant was offered," one official said, "rejecting it could be seen as dishonor, and accepting it blindly could bind us to something we don't understand," another replied. The decision was left in Ethan's hands, at least for now. Back in the sanctum, Sayla spoke again. "The covenant you invoked is not one of ownership or control. It is a bond of mutual protection, trust, and shared future choice." Ethan looked up. "So I wouldn't belong to anyone." "No," Myron said. "You would stand with us." That eased some of the tightness in Ethan's chest. Still, doubt remained. "But I didn't choose this knowingly." Thalkai stepped forward for the first time. Her voice was low but gentle. "Many choices begin without full knowing. What matters is what follows." Ethan closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of Earth, of humanity's long history of mistakes and recovery. Humans stumbled often, but they learned. They tried to make things right. "If I walk away," Ethan asked, "what happens?" "There will be disappointment," Sayla said honestly. "Trust would weaken. Others would learn that human words shift without warning." "And if I stay?" Ethan asked. "Then a new meaning may be shaped," Myron said, "one that fits both our peoples." The idea struck Ethan with sudden clarity. "Then let me redefine it," he said, "not as a promise made in ignorance, but as one accepted with understanding." The sisters watched him closely. "I can't promise what I didn't mean," Ethan continued. "But I can promise honesty, effort, and respect. I can promise that humans will not abandon responsibility just because it started by accident." Silence followed, long and deep. Thalkai nodded slowly. "This is acceptable." Sayla's pattern softened. "You speak with intent now." The covenant was not sealed that day. Instead, it was paused, held in careful balance. Ethan was granted time to learn, to understand what the covenant truly meant. In return, the Larathi would observe humanity more closely, measuring their actions rather than their words. As Ethan left the sanctum, the city felt different again. Less expectant, more curious. That night, Ethan sent a detailed report to Earth. He explained everything, from the misunderstanding to the opportunity hidden within it. His message ended with a simple line: "Humans are being judged not by what we meant to say, but by what we choose to do next." The response took hours to arrive. "We trust your judgment," it finally read. "Proceed carefully. You carry more than yourself." Ethan stared at the message, feeling the weight of it. He was no longer just a diplomat. He was a test case. Over the following days, Ethan met with historians, linguists, and cultural guides. He learned how deeply the Larathi valued consistency, how their society survived by trusting that spoken intent would be honored. He also shared stories of humanity's flaws and growth, of promises broken and rebuilt. The Larathi listened. Word of the situation began to spread beyond Velthira. Other species watched quietly, some amused, others doubtful. Humans were known for adaptability but also for chaos. Many expected failure. Ethan felt the pressure, but he did not retreat. Each day, he chose his words carefully. Each action reinforced the same message. Humans might joke, might err, but they did not flee from consequence. One evening, as Ethan stood near the reflective pool outside his quarters, Selah joined him. "You carry uncertainty well," she said. Ethan gave a small smile. "I don't have much choice." "Choice is always present," she replied. "You choose to stay." Ethan looked at the water, seeing his reflection ripple. "I think that's what makes humans human." Selah inclined her head. Then perhaps this covenant was not spoken too soon. Above them, the lights of Velthira shimmered softly, as if listening. The galaxy waited, watching how humanity would define itself, not through perfect words, but through the courage to stand by them once spoken. The attention from the wider galaxy did not arrive all at once. It came slowly, like distant stars turning their focus toward a single point. At first, only a few observers requested records of the events on Velthira. Then questions followed. Then quiet discussions in places Ethan could not see. Ethan felt it in the way meetings changed. Larathi scholars began asking deeper questions, not just about language, but about human history. They wanted to know how a species that treated words so lightly could still build long-lasting bonds. Ethan answered honestly. He spoke of Earth's early conflicts, of nations that promised peace and failed, and of the painful lessons learned afterward. He spoke of agreements rebuilt slowly, with effort and trust instead of force. He did not hide humanity's mistakes. Instead, he explained how humans learned from them. "We are not perfect," Ethan said during one session, standing before a circle of Larathi listeners. "We say things we don't fully think through, but when we realize the weight of our words, many of us try to make it right." Myron observed him closely. "You place value on correction." "Yes," Ethan replied. "We believe growth matters more than pride." That idea spread. Beyond Velthira, representatives of other species gathered in the Galactic Forum, a place where long-lived civilizations debated quietly and judged carefully. Humans were new there. They were considered loud, fast, and emotionally unpredictable. The story of Ethan's mistake reached them as entertainment at first. "A human declared a covenant by accident," one delegate said, "as expected." "They will withdraw," another replied. "They always do when consequences appear." But days passed, then weeks. And humanity did not withdraw. Instead, human diplomats released a public statement acknowledging the misunderstanding and supporting Ethan's decision to remain engaged. There were no excuses, no attempts to rewrite history, just acceptance. That surprised many. On Velthira, the Triune Sisters noticed the shift. Visitors arrived, observers, scholars, quiet watchers from distant systems. They did not interfere, but they listened. They watched how Ethan behaved under pressure. Ethan felt the weight of those eyes every day. One afternoon, he was invited to attend a gathering unlike any before. It was not ceremonial, it was practical. Leaders from several species joined via projection, their forms shimmering in the open chamber. This was not a trial, but it felt like one. A tall, angular being spoke first. "Human representative, explain why your species speaks without binding intent." Ethan did not react defensively. He had learned better. "Because we fear silence more than error," he said. "We speak to connect. Sometimes that creates mistakes. But silence creates distance." Another voice followed, calm and cold. "Distance preserves stability." "Sometimes," Ethan agreed, but it also prevents understanding. Murmurs rippled through the projections. Thalkai finally spoke, her voice grounding the room. Observe the human carefully. He does not deny fault. He does not retreat. He adapts. That single sentence carried weight. Later that day, Ethan felt exhausted. He sat alone near the edge of the city, watching the lights drift across the crystal paths. For the first time since arriving, doubt crept in. "What if I'm not enough?" he asked quietly. Sayla approached without sound. "You are not alone in carrying this." "I made a joke," Ethan said, "and now entire species are judging humanity because of it." Sayla's patterns shifted gently. History often turns on smaller moments. Ethan laughed softly. "Humans have a saying, 'Leave it to us to trip over our own feet and change the world.'" Sayla considered this. "That may be your strength." The Covenant discussions evolved after that. No longer focused on Ethan alone, they became a broader examination of how trust could exist between species with different relationships to language. Ethan proposed something bold. "What if the Covenant isn't about binding a person," he said during a council session, "but about binding intent to action? What if words begin the process but behavior completes it?" The idea was controversial. Older species valued rigid clarity, but they could not deny the evidence before them. Humanity, flawed and fast-moving, had not broken away when things became complicated. Instead, they leaned in. Observers took note. One by one, subtle changes occurred. Human diplomats were invited into discussions previously closed to them, not because of power or technology, but because they showed willingness to take responsibility even when it was uncomfortable. Ethan felt pride, not in himself, but in his species. He sent updates to Earth regularly, careful with every word now, but he did not lose his humanity. He still smiled, still admitted uncertainty, still listened. One message from Earth stood out: "You are showing them who we are at our best." That night Ethan stood again by the reflective pool. This time Myron joined him. "Other species are reevaluating humans," she said. "Some feel unsettled." "Why?" Ethan asked. "Because you do not fit clean categories," Myron replied. "You are careless yet accountable. Emotional yet resilient." Ethan smiled. "We're full of contradictions," Myron nodded. "Contradictions can be dangerous." "Or powerful," Ethan said. The turning point came during a public forum broadcast across multiple systems. A senior delegate openly challenged Ethan. "Why should we trust a species that treats commitment as humor?" Ethan paused before answering. He felt the eyes of the galaxy on him. "Because when we realize something matters," he said, "we choose to treat it seriously. Not because we were forced to, but because we decided it was right." The silence that followed was not mocking. It was thoughtful. The Triune Sisters exchanged a look. They had not chosen humanity lightly, even by accident. They saw now that the misunderstanding had revealed something rare. A species that did not pretend to be perfect. A species that stumbled, admitted it, and kept walking forward. As the forum ended, messages began arriving. Invitations, requests, quiet acknowledgments of respect. Ethan felt a deep, steady calm for the first time. He had not erased the mistake. He had transformed it. Above Velthera, the stars seemed brighter, not because they changed, but because the way humanity was seen among them had shifted. The Covenant was no longer just a Larathi matter. It was becoming something larger, a symbol of how intent, responsibility, and choice could bridge even the widest gaps. And at the center of it all stood a human who once made a joke, now carrying the proof that even unintended words could become the foundation of trust, if one was brave enough to stand by them. Time changed the Covenant, just as it changed everything else. What began as a misunderstanding slowly became a shared idea, shaped by patience and choice instead of force. Ethan felt that change in the rhythm of Velthera. The city no longer watched him with expectation alone, but with familiarity. He was no longer treated as a guest walking on careful ground. He was treated as someone trusted to walk freely. The Triune Sisters called him to the sanctum one final time. This time, there were no observers hiding behind projections, no silent watchers from distant systems. Only the sisters and Ethan standing together in the calm heart of the structure. Sayla spoke first. "The Covenant has reached its moment." Ethan nodded. He had expected this, yet his chest tightened all the same. "I'm ready to listen." Myron stepped forward, her patterns clear and steady. What was once a personal declaration has become a shared principle. It must now be defined openly. Thalkai's voice followed, slow and certain. Not as a bond of possession, not as a binding of lives, but as a vow of responsibility after speech. Ethan felt a quiet relief. That's something humans understand. Together, they rewrote the covenant, not line by line, but meaning by meaning. It declared that when words created impact beyond intent, responsibility did not vanish. It also declared that growth and correction were valid paths, not signs of weakness. When it was complete, the covenant was shared across the galactic forum. The response was unlike anything recorded before. Some species resisted. They had built civilizations on unchanging rules and rigid interpretation. Others, especially younger or fractured cultures, felt something close to hope. A system that allowed error without collapse, a principle that valued intent followed by action. Humanity's standing changed almost overnight, not because they were flawless speakers, but because they were seen as honest ones. Ethan received messages from Earth filled with cautious pride. Schools discussed the covenant. Diplomats studied it. Ordinary people followed the story of the human who joked, stumbled, and then stood firm. Years passed. Ethan stayed on Velthira far longer than planned, not because he was required to, but because he chose to. He helped train new diplomats, human and alien alike. He taught one lesson above all others. "Words matter," he would say, "but what you do after them matters more." The Triune Sisters remained close allies, not bound to Ethan but connected by trust that did not need ceremony. They often walked with him through the city, discussing philosophy, history, and the strange contradictions of humanity. "One day," Myron said during one such walk, "another species may repeat your mistake." Ethan smiled. "I hope they do." Sayla tilted her head. "Why?" "Because now there's a path forward when it happens." The covenant spread. Slowly, carefully, but steadily. It was referenced during disputes, negotiations, and reconciliations. It did not erase conflict, but it changed how conflict ended. Humanity earned a new reputation among the stars. They were not the strongest, not the oldest, not the most orderly, but they were the ones who stayed when things became uncomfortable. Ethan grew older on Velthira. His hair grayed, his movements slowed. The city adapted quietly around him, adjusting paths and light levels in subtle respect. On the anniversary of the Covenant's adoption, a gathering was held beneath an open sky. Representatives from many worlds attended. There were no grand speeches, only shared reflection. Ethan stood beside the Triune Sisters, looking up at the stars. "I never meant to change anything," he said softly. Thalkai replied, "Few ever do." Ethan chuckled. "Humans have another saying. Intent starts the journey, but choice decides the destination." Sayla placed a hand over her chest in the Larathi gesture of respect. "Then your species has chosen well." When Ethan passed peacefully years later, the news traveled far, not with mourning alone, but with gratitude. He was remembered not as a hero of conquest or invention, but as a symbol of something quieter and rarer. A being who accepted responsibility when it would have been easier to step away. On Velthira, a simple marker was placed near the reflective pool where Ethan had often stood. It carried no name, only a sentence translated into many languages. "Words may stumble, choice stands." Humanity continued forward among the stars, still joking, still imperfect, still learning. But wherever they went, the covenant followed, not as a rule, but as a reminder. that even a single careless sentence, when met with honesty and courage, could become the foundation of trust between worlds. And that was why, long after Ethan Hale was gone, the galaxy still whispered one quiet truth about humans. They did not always speak perfectly, but when it mattered, they chose to mean it. I joked about being single. The alien sisters interpreted it as a covenant HFY.